So my name is Bettina Diel. I'm studying here in the third year in the last. My work is process-oriented and material-based, and I'm concerned with spatial arrangements in order to visualize tensions and rhythm in space. And I'm very delighted to introduce the half-German, half-Iranian artist, Anahita Razmi, who's a video and performance artist based in Berlin and Zurich, as far as I heard. She studied in Weimar, New York, and Stuttgart, and her work has been shown extensively. To just name a few exhibitions from this year, there was, for example, one in Kunstverein Hannover. She also took part in the Venice Biennale and the Padiglione Venezia with a work called Silk Map. And she had a show called Encyclonospace Iranica in Access Gallery in Vancouver. And her works have dealt with issues concerning identity and gender. And she establishes often her works in relationship with contemporary Iran. In 2010, she received a work stipend from Edith Russ Site for media art in Germany for her work, the Paykan Project. You might speak about that later. No.
Unfortunately not.
But I'm very happy to listen to the talk now and look forward to the workshop you give.
Thank you. So thanks a lot for the introduction. And basically, you already said, like, I'm going to show 3 works that are somehow all relating to Iran and contemporary issues in Iran. And you already mentioned I'm half German, half Iranian, and that starts already maybe a question about identity. So how do I define myself? Am I Iranian as soon as I'm working with Iran, or am I a German artist and focusing on my view, my German viewpoint on this country and the issues that are coming up when talking about this country? So the first work I'm going to show is a video I did in 2007, and that actually was done in Tehran, so it was realized in Iran. And it's a very short video, so it's 47 seconds only. I'm just gonna... So was the text readable? So what interested me in just using these 27 seconds that were actually not recorded by myself. So I was filming a video in Tehran, basically a tourist thing, like just filming on the street, and decided to not use any of that footage, but just the footage that was filmed by the Revolutionary Guard, which is very present in Iran. So there's various polices in Iran on the streets, and they called me like, what were you filming? And erased the part that was showing themselves with the white wall from the headquarters. So I was actually interested in doing that because I find the connections that the video makes quite or the questions that are raised interesting. So basically I'm talking about a document of a situation, and one could ask, is that video a documentary, or isn't it, because it's not showing an image? Or also one could ask, is it actually a work of myself, because I didn't film it? I'm using the footage of somebody else. Or another question that could be raised is the video actually talking about censorship and restrictions in Iran? Or is it talking more about like how we are viewing, or how we expect restrictions and censorship in Iran? And what images do we expect when we see this white wall? Because the white wall is actually a projection space. So that these questions actually lead me to the other works that I'm going to show, and I'm very interested in this thing, like how we look at things and from what perspective. So also when working with Iranian context, it's not so much talking about a country, but in relation to this country. That I'm not, my father is Iranian, but I don't consider myself as an Iranian. I'm talking with a country that I don't know, actually. I just know from histories and of other people, of my family, but I haven't lived there. So the next work I'm going to show is a work I did last year, and it's called Helter Fucking Skelter. It's actually a series, and it's 8 oriental carpets, carpet collages, I would say, because it's basically, I took those ready-made carpets that are hand-woven and put these laser-cut letters, also made from oriental carpets, onto them. So there's different statements readable on the carpets, and it's, for example, this one, which says, "I want an international lover." Or this one saying, "Permission to fire." Or that one says, "Identity, complex identity." And the concept of that work is also a thing that it's a thing that I often do. It's like, it's a quote actually from another artist that might not be so obvious. It's a quote of Tracy Emin. Tracy Emin does these quilts, so it's also textile works, but she's using totally different textiles. And basically, this is the works of Tracy Emin. They're really known. I'm sure you know them. It's an installation view from Hayward Gallery, and you also see on the right-hand corner, there's this "I want an international lover," and there's other things like "Helter fucking Skelter" also on the right hand that she uses there. So I'm basically taking her quotes and putting them like onto this other material. And again, like what I'm interested in when doing this is like, let's see, I go back to this one, for example, is what is actually happening to these sentences, which in Tracy Emin's work are very personal. I mean, if you know her other works as well, it's it's seen as this very expressive and personal story of herself. So what has happened when I take her quotes, which directly like link to her life, and quote them and put them into this other context, and also onto this other material. And also Tracy Emin does this handmade thing, and this is like a very mechanical production. So this laser cut thing is not relating to any person. I don't stitch the letters onto the carpets. It's a mechanical production. So how are these sentences read? And I think they are read in a completely different way if you don't know For example, I mean, this context you have to know about. I don't think people would say, okay, yeah, that's a quote from Tracy M, and it's basically a thing that you then read, and you might think the work is somehow a trap. It's the first thing that you associate is something that differs from maybe the second view. So, okay. So, the thing, like also with the carpets, it's like, if I say we're reading those sentences, I'm actually interested in how do we want to read the sentences or want to see a certain thing, and from what perspective are we watching? Are the carpets, for example, are they seen differently when I'm showing them in the Middle East? Or are they read differently when I'm showing them in Switzerland, for example? And that also, I mean, this is the third project and the last project I want to show, and that is a work that is also drawing or referencing another artist's work. So it is called Piece Tehran, and it's a 12-channel video installation I did in 2011. And this is one still from one of the videos, and it's showing a woman dancing on a roof in Tehran. And in the back you see another, like really small, another dancer on another roof. And the work is quoting also a very known work from Trisha Brown, a performance that is called Roof Piece. And that was performed in Soho in New York in 1971 for the first time. There were several re-performances of her. And the photo is also very known. It's a photo by Babette Mangold, who did a lot of documentary photos at that time of this performance and movement in New York. And you see a dancer in front and another dancer on the left side of the image. I don't know how many you see. I think like one could see 3. Yeah, I see 3. So basically the performance is also taking 12 dancers. I did the same thing in Tehran, and one dancer is starting, at that time it was Patricia Brown herself, starting a body movement, and the other dancers are basically mimicking her. So it's like Chinese whispers effect. So one is starting and the other one is repeating a movement, the other one is repeating, and it goes on from one roof to the other, from 1 to 12. And basically with Piece Tehran, I took that performance and the concept of the performance and took it to a totally different space, so and also a totally different time. So I did go from New York in the 70s to Tehran in 2011. So these are like 12 video stills of the performance. So you see the 12 dancers. And what interested me in doing this is, like, one knows, I mean, Tehran is not New York. There's different restrictions for that performance. For example, the most important one that maybe not everybody knows is that there's no contemporary dance in Tehran. It is actually a forbidden thing. You cannot go to a dance performance there or something. So basically also, how do I find dances, and how can I realize a performance in public space also, which is somehow, if I ask for a permission, it will not be possible. So I was interested in how this will transform the performance in a way, and also in the roof space itself, because the roof space in Tehran is a different space than a roof in New York. Also in Tehran, there's, I don't know if you remember, in 2009 there were the big protests after the Iranian presidential election, and there were people, I mean, at night on the roofs shouting like this, "Death to the dictator, Allahu Akbar," like these protest shouts, and they were echoing from one roof to the other. And it was basically a part of the protest. So I was interested in doing this, like now we're having these 12 roofs and we're basically echoing a body movement. So it's an echo of a dance movement. So does that relate somehow to this protest, or doesn't it? And yeah, so actually, yeah. While doing this, I would say, I worked with dancers from Tehran. So, I mean, not official dancers. As I said, there are no dancers, but one could find people who are actually into dance and to do it, of course. So, or people from theater who are interested into dance, so I worked with them. And we did this performance on the roofs, and there was one camera on each roof documenting the performance, because we also couldn't have an audience. So Trisha Brown could have an audience and make the performance official, but in Tehran that was not possible. So because it would have raised too much attention, and we already had to be very fast and very like a guerrilla thing in doing that. So we couldn't say, come, 100 people also on the roof. So what I decided to do is filming the performance and make it actually a video performance in the end, because who is the audience of that? It's basically a thing that is maybe not for the city, because I can also not show that work in Tehran. So who is it for? And that is a thing, like the first time the project was shown was at Frieze Art Fair in London. And that also, when talking about these transitions between, I said like New York and Tehran, there's another transformation of the piece, I would say, in going from Tehran to London, because that is also, it's bringing it to this highly stylized art context again, and it's the first time, as I said, the first time the piece is shown. So is that actually the audience for the piece? And how is it going to be looked at? Like what associations come into the piece when showing it there? How does it transform? And I think what for me in this, it was basically also an experiment, but became very interesting for me is like at what point, or the question is like, at what point does the piece become political? Because it was seen as a very political piece. And I was always asking, at what point does this association happen? And also, yeah, what do the local changes add to the piece? Also because the piece cannot be shown in Tehran. So what does the step towards like the Western art world generate for the piece? And if I would show the piece in Iran, would it be perceived like different? So that's basically, I mean, another shot of another installation that was at Bucharest Biennale, so you can see more of these monitors. That's how I show the work usually. Okay, I don't have any video for that because it's like, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, Anahita. Let me see how many questions there are. Nana, please. And then we take both questions, Nana and Michael. Or one. Okay, if you prefer. So Nana first, please.
I have a simple technical question. Are these various different sizes, the monitors? And is that image in the back projected or also on a monitor? And it's just the way it's shot? And then a second question. So if you're interested in that moment, which I'm also very curious about, so when, I know you phrased it differently, but what's the moment when a word is considered political? Do you have a few, and we can just keep it framed with that work? Because I think it's a perfect example because of its reenactments and translations and quotations. Yeah, but you don't have to answer the question only in reference to that work.
I mean, for me, it was really interesting to see how the piece was perceived. Like, for example, there was a lot of discussion about, like, okay, this is very dangerous to do, and how did you do it, and how was it possible to have 12 people on the roofs in Tehran and not, like, who did take part actually, and isn't that, I mean, the discussion about the risk was very much dominant in the perception of the piece, like the first one, especially when going back to London and this art fair, for example, because it was like, okay, we have something happening here that is illegal, and we're showing it here now, and actually, yeah, and the thing that was interesting for me in this experiment was that sometimes I felt like people didn't like this perception doesn't reflect on your own viewpoint, for example. I mean, when talking about Iran, you already have lots of associations. I don't need to say anything, and it just comes up. It's almost impossible to do a work that is not political in a way. So I was actually interested in what people bring to the piece themselves. So it's very open in a way.
And the concrete question about the monitors?
Yeah, that in that case at Bucharest Biennale, but there was one image that was projected, but usually I show them on 12 screens. Yeah.
Thank you. Then next, Michael, please.
Thank you. I was just wondering how you deal with the fact that you consider yourself not as an Iranian, but work with Iranian topics, imageries, and the fact that we might look at this as exotic and that this is something very appealing, and what effect does it has on your work?
I think that's an interesting question, I would say, because I mean, I'm trying to deal with this theme of Iran exactly in addressing these questions. You know, it's like, as I said, like, of course, I mean, I have this Iranian background, but I did go to Iran the first time when I was 24, so it's not like yeah, I have connections, but they are sort of abstract. So it's always, my viewpoint is always a viewpoint that is far away and outside. But still, I think it's like having this viewpoint and like making it like a point in your work is very interesting, because I see things differently. I come with different existing concepts, like from the Western art world, and apply them onto this context of Iran and see if they work, or if they clash, or if they are perceived in a totally different way, and at what point does this perception change? Does it change already when I go there or when I go back? And yeah. Does that answer it?
Somehow, but just to put it in another way, do you actually play with the fact that you use something exotic for your audience? It's a bit sharpened, but shortened.
I do, yeah. Also, I think when talking about exotic things, or even like saying people have stereotypes, and people, it's not something that you can deny. It's just there, and for me, it's interesting to work with that, but also question it at the same point.
There's space for another question. Maybe building on the question that has been asked and your answer, an artist talking about one's work, you always have different possibilities. And you are the first one to use a different narration. It would have also been possible to say, I've been brought up in a household where maybe stories about everyday life and Irene has been part of, etc. That's how I got interested. So you could also knit that thread. Why do you decide for this other approach in presenting the work? I would be interested to know more about that.
To not make it a personal thing.
The questions that come up, whether with exotic, etc., they have to do with how you present it, and you would have the possibility to present and contextualize your work in a different way.
Yeah.
So I was wondering what you would say about that.
I mean, for me, it's like if talking about the personal and aspect of your work, of course, there's personal interests in my work, but I try to keep it like. For me, it's more like an area of research in a way. Of course, I have personal relations to this country that like Iran, that I work with, but it's not so much affecting my work. It's more like a research of things. And for me, I mean, that's also a personal decision, I mean, to how one wants to work. I mean, I often do video performances. I even perform myself, but it's not so much about self-expression or anything like that.
Of course. Thank you. Please, the mic here for smooth.
A very straightforward question. It's, what does Iran mean to you?
A lot, actually. That's what I meant. Like, I have a very personal relationship to that country, and also I have family there and stuff. So, but I don't, yeah. But it was more meant in terms of my work also. I mean, it's still, even if I have family there, it's like if you don't visit them till you're 24, it's an abstract thing. You phone maybe, or it somehow stays abstract. It's a thing that is in the distance. It's still there, but it's not like the thing you deal with in everyday life or something.
I think we're starting to get to these interesting intersections for our panel discussion. And of course, because we've already heard a few presentations, we more and more get there to know what we would like to talk about. Then I would like to thank you very much, Anahita. Thank you.